17.3%. 78%. Both of those numbers answer the same question. What share of American firms use artificial intelligence? And both were measured in November 2025. Their collection windows overlap by a full week. One comes from the United States Census Bureau. The other comes from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Neither is a typo, neither is a lie. Both were produced by careful people who published their methods and their questionnaires. So which one would you quote? That sounds like a footnote about survey design. It is not. It is the argument of the next half hour because the distance between those two numbers has a shape. And once you can see the shape, you can read every AI adoption statistic anyone will ever put in front of you. Here is the claim, stated plainly enough that you can break it. There is no such thing as AI adoption rate. Across credible surveys of the same economy in the same year, the number runs from 6% to 88%. It moves with who you ask. It moves with how long a window you give them. And more than anything, it moves with which business functions you name out loud. Underneath that noise, though, two things hold still. The first is where AI actually sits inside a company, not everywhere. Sales and marketing, strategy, and information technology. The second is what it has done so far. And on that, the surveys that disagree by a factor of 4 agree almost exactly. Start with the Fortnight. Chapter 1, the Fortnight where America used AI twice. Picture two surveys running past each other in the same 3 weeks of November 2025. The first is the Business Trends and Outlook survey, run by the Census Bureau. Its sample is about 1.2 million businesses, split into 6 panels of roughly 200,000 each. Collection runs every 2 weeks. It covers every employer business in the United States economy except farms. Nobody is paid to answer it. Nobody is recruited by telephone. Whoever in the business has the relevant knowledge fills it in. An owner, a manager, sometimes whoever handles the paperwork. For the reference period of the 3rd to the 16th of November, that survey put current firm-level AI use at 17.3%. The second is the Survey of Business Uncertainty, run by the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. It is monthly, it is online. Its panel is built by calling senior people at firms and confirming who they are before enrolling them. The November wave had about 1,100 respondents. Around 80% of them were chief executives, chief financial officers, or senior management. It ran from the 10th to the 21st of November, so the two windows overlap by a week. Pooled into a 4-country study the Atlanta Fed published in March 2026, that survey put United States adoption at 78% of firms. Across all 4 countries, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Australia, nearly 6,000 firms. The average was 69%. Same country, same month, 17.3 and 78. Before you assume one of them is simply wrong, look at what each one actually asked. The census question is a yes or no. Did this business use artificial intelligence in any business function between these 2 dates? The Atlanta Fed question is a menu. Which of the following artificial intelligence technologies, if any, does your firm currently use? Then it lists 7 options. Text generation using large language models, robotics, image processing using machine learning, data processing using machine learning, autonomous vehicles, visual content creation, other. Read those 2 questions again and ask yourself which one you would find easier to say yes to. One hands you a binary and a fortnight. The other hands you 7 doors and the word currently, which you are free to read as this week, this quarter, or ever. And 3 of those 7 doors do not necessarily involve artificial intelligence at all. Robotics, autonomous vehicles, visual content creation. That is not my complaint. It is in the census paper, written by the people whose job is to reconcile these numbers. There is a second difference, and it is about who is in the room. The Atlanta Fed panel is decision makers by construction. Phoned, confirmed, enrolled. The researchers themselves note that the sponsorship of a Federal Reserve Bank helps with recruiting senior management. The census respondent is whoever picks it up. That person might run the warehouse. They may have no idea that 3 people in marketing have been drafting campaign copy with a chatbot since March. Both of those biases are real and they point in opposite directions. The executive overreports because he has seen the strategy deck. The administrator underreports because she has not seen the browser tab. And then there is placement. In the Atlanta Fed survey, the question about your firm comes after a question about your own personal use. That primes you. You have just told a survey you spend an hour and a half a week with these tools. What are the odds you then say your company does not use them? The census paper flags this as double-edged. Priming can sharpen the answer. It can also blur the line between what you do and what your employer does. Here is the part I found genuinely disarming. The Atlanta Fed's own paper raises this problem in its first footnote. It notes that McKinsey put business AI use at around 88% in a paid internet survey, and that the Census Bureau put it at around 9% in 2024. Then it says in its own words that the fact these two surveys provide almost tenfold differences in AI adoption highlights the importance of survey design. The people who produced the 78% told you, on page 2, not to read it as the truth. So what happens if you stop treating this as a contest between numbers and start treating it as a measurement problem with a solution? Chapter 2, 15 boxes. In late 2025, the Census Bureau did the thing statistical agencies hate doing most. It changed the question. From September 2023 until November 2025, the survey asked whether a business used artificial intelligence in producing goods or services. That phrasing was deliberate. It was lifted from the 2019 annual business survey, and it was built as a filter to separate AI doing economically significant work from AI running the air conditioning. It was written for a world before ChatGPT. Then the Bureau ran cognitive interviews in 2025. If you have never seen one, it is exactly what it sounds like. You sit with a respondent, you watch them answer, and then you ask what they thought the words meant. What came back is the most useful finding in the entire paper. Respondents in marketing, in administration, in businesses that broker rather than manufacture, could not connect what they were doing to the word production. Many of them said no. And then in the follow-up interview, they described substantial AI use. In marketing, in accounting, in project management, in research and development. They were not lying to the survey, they answered the question they were asked. The question was the wrong shape for their business. So on the 17th of November 2025, the wording changed. From in producing goods or services to in any business function. The firm-weighted use rate went from about 10% to about 18%. Be careful here because three things changed at once. The wording changed, a new survey cycle began, and a large AI supplement went into the field alongside it, which by itself makes people think harder about the question. The census authors list all three, do not hand the whole jump to wording. But that supplement is where this gets interesting, because the supplement stops asking one question and starts reading you a list. 2 matrices, 15 business functions each, one for the last 6 months, one for the next 6. Here are the 15, and it is worth hearing all of them. Production of goods, provision of services, products, or merchandise, strategy and business development, finance and accounting, sales and marketing, customer service, research and development, information technology, human resources, public relations and communication, management and administration, sourcing, supply chains and purchasing, quality management and control, distribution, legal and compliance. Reaffirm that list and the AI use rate is 27.7%. Ask the same population a yes or no about a 2-week window, and it is 17.3. Now I want to be scrupulous about that comparison, because it is exactly the kind of thing that gets quoted badly. Those two questions differ by more than the prompting. One covers 6 months, the other covers a fortnight. The census authors say so plainly, and so will I. You cannot hand the whole 10-point gap to naming the functions. Some of it is the window, but the Bureau's own cognitive testing tells you which way the rest of it runs. And now the number that made me want to build this video. 2 of those 15 functions are in the list deliberately as a bridge back to the old question, production of goods, and provision of services, products, or merchandise. Take the union of those 2, every firm that said yes to either one, over 6 months. 6%. 6 against a pre-revision estimate of 10% on the old 2-week question. And the paper adds a footnote you should not skip. Because that 6% covers 6 months rather than 2 weeks, the 2-week rate would be lower still. Do you see what that implies? The old question, the one everybody quoted for 2 years as AI in production, was capturing use well beyond production. Strip it back to the functions that actually make the thing the company sells, and the number starts with a 6. Which raises the obvious question. If it is not in production, where is it? Chapter 3, the departments whose output is a document. Take every firm using AI in at least one business function. Rank the 15 functions by how many of those firms use it there. First, sales and marketing. 52%. Second, strategy and business development, 45%. Third, information technology, 41%. Fourth, research and development, 40%. Then a cluster of administrative work, public relations and communication, management and administration, legal and compliance, alongside customer service, finance and accounting, and the provision of services and products. And at the bottom, production, sourcing and supply chains, quality management and control, distribution. Look at the top 4 and ask what they have in common. A campaign, a plan, a ticket, a specification. In every one of those functions, the unit of work is a document, and a person reads that document before it does anything in the world. Now look at the bottom 4, a pallet, a weld, a shipment, a batch that either passes inspection or does not. That is the cleanest way I can state the finding. AI has landed in the departments whose output is a document, and barely at all in the departments whose output is the product. I owe you the competing explanation because the paper offers one and it is fair. Some of those low-scoring functions are sector-specific. Supply chain and quality management live mostly in manufacturing. A 3-person law firm has no distribution department to put AI into, so it counts as a no. That is real and it deflates part of the gap. It does not deflate all of it. Because the union of production and service provision is a function every business has by definition, and that union is the 6% from the last chapter. There is one more twist, and it changes the picture depending on how you count. Weight the same answers by employment instead of by firm, and the order moves. Information technology goes to the top, finance and accounting comes second, sales and marketing drops to third. Which tells you something quite specific. Large employers put AI into the back office first, small ones put it into the front. So where is it going next? The same firms were asked about the following 6 months, and the expected increases are the tell. Firm-weighted, the biggest anticipated gains are in sales and marketing, strategy and business development, customer service and finance and accounting. Employment-weighted, the biggest anticipated gains are in finance and accounting, human resources, research and development, and public relations. Notice what appears on neither list. Production, distribution, quality control. The sector numbers say the same thing from a different direction. Under the revised question, the 5 highest adopting sectors are information at 38%, professional, scientific and technical services at 34%, educational services at 31%, finance and insurance at 30%, and real estate at 24%. The national rate is 18%, so the information sector is running at more than double the country. And the sectors that make and move physical things, manufacturing, construction, transportation and warehousing, wholesale and retail, sit well below the average. If you work in one of those, you have probably felt the distance between what you read about AI and what you see on the floor. The data says you are not imagining it. There is a size gradient too, and it is steep but not as steep as you might expect. Firms with 250 or more employees report 31% adoption. Firms under 20 employees report around 18%. So it is not that only giants are doing this. It is that everyone is doing a little of it in the same few places. Which brings the real question into focus, not how many firms have adopted AI. How much of a firm has adopted it? Chapter 4, 1.2%. Among firms using AI in at least one business function, 24% use it in exactly one function. The share falls almost monotonically from there. 57% use it in 3 functions or fewer, about 1% use it in all 15. That is the shape of enterprise AI in 2026, in 3 sentences. The census team went further. They sorted firms into types using a latent class analysis across those 15 functions. 5 classes, weighted so the result represents the business population rather than the sample. Here they are as shares of all firms. Non-users, 72.3%. Minimalist adopters, 10.2% of all firms. Average number of functions using AI, 2.13. These are not small companies, by the way. They average 30 employees, which is larger than the typical non-user. Marketing specialists, 8.6%, 2.32 functions. Average size, 18 employees. Small firms using AI to reach people. Technical strategists, 3.4%, 5.5 functions. Research, strategy, information technology, 22 employees on average. Institutional administrative integrators, 4.2%, 7.25 functions, the largest class by headcount at 41 employees. Governance shops, management, strategy, finance, human resources, legal, and compliance. And then the class everybody writes about. Comprehensive adopters, AI across almost the entire business. 12 of the 15 functions, 5 distinct worker tasks. 1.2% of American firms. 1.2. Every keynote you have ever sat through about the AI native enterprise is a description of that 1.2%. It is a real group. It is a rare one. Where do those classes live? The census team normalized each class against the overall firm population, so that a value of 1 means a sector is exactly as represented as you would expect it to be. Across every single class, 4 sectors are overrepresented, often at twice their population share: information, professional services, finance, education. Professional services firms cluster hardest among the technical strategists. Firms spanning multiple sectors drift toward the administrative and comprehensive types. Retail, real estate, and arts and entertainment are dominated by marketing specialists. But the broad picture survives all of that variation. In almost every industry, an AI-using firm is most likely to be a minimalist or a marketing specialist. Ask yourself which of those 5 classes your own employer actually belongs to, not which one the strategy deck claims, which one the function count would put it in. Here is the detail that convinced me the narrowness is not a measurement artifact. 64% of AI-using businesses report making no institutional adjustments at all. None, no new workflows, no retraining, no data work. Of the adjustments that do happen, the 2 most common are training staff and developing new workflows, each at roughly 15% of AI-using firms. The deeper changes, the ones that would signal a company rebuilding itself around the technology, changes to data management and storage, complementary capital investment, run at 7 to 8%. And of the 9 adjustments offered, the least common of all is hiring staff trained in AI. Sit with that combination for a second. A firm buys a subscription, somebody in marketing starts using it, nothing else changes. That is not a transformation, that is a tool purchase. And it explains something that has puzzled a lot of people, including me. If adoption is real and rising, why is nothing visibly moving in the productivity statistics? Because most of what is being counted as adoption is 1 department, 2 functions off the shelf, with no change to how the work is organized. So that is what the demand side looks like on the ground. What exactly is the supply side building? Chapter 5: What the release wave is actually aimed at. On the 13th of August 2026, OpenAI published a builder's guide to its GPT 5.6 family. Buried in it is a comparison you should know about. There is a benchmark called BrowseComp. It tests whether a model can search the web and find obscure facts. 3 months earlier, GPT 5.5, running at its highest reasoning setting, scored 84.36%. On that benchmark, the compute bill for the run was $33.27. At launch, a smaller GPT 5.6 model scored 84.04%. The bill was $1.33. Same benchmark, essentially the same score, roughly 1/25th of the cost, 1/4 of 1 year. And the company noted in the same piece that it had already cut the price again since. There is a second number in that guide worth holding onto. On a reasoning benchmark called RKGI3, the same model scored 13.3% with a standard harness, and 38.3% once the developers turned on 2 settings that let it keep its reasoning between turns and compress long conversations. No change to the model, nearly 3 times the score using about 6 times fewer output tokens. Take that in for a second. Capability is compounding and the cost of capability is collapsing. That is not hype. That is a vendor publishing its own numbers with dollar signs attached to them. If you build anything on top of these models, that second number changes what you can afford to attempt. Now hold that against what the same industry shipped commercially in the same fortnight. 5 days later, on the 18th of August, OpenAI announced that ChatGPT ads was expanding into 31 European markets. In its own words, the largest expansion to date. The pilot began in the United States in February, 8 more markets followed over 6 months, then 31 at once. The company says tens of thousands of marketers have now advertised on ChatGPT, and that it has built out conversion optimization, geo-targeting, custom audiences, a tracking pixel, and a conversions API. Read that list again. Every item on it is a marketing operations feature. Not an agent for your supply chain, not a quality control model, a conversions API. Look at Anthropic's product menu on the same day, and you find the same gravity differently expressed. The company sells Claude Code, it sells Claude Cowork, and under a heading that literally reads Claude Apps Built For, it lists 3, design, science, and security. The product line is organized by business function. That is a striking thing on its own. But open the design one and read what it says it does. Prototypes, wireframes, design explorations, pitch decks, marketing collateral, landing pages, social assets and campaign visuals, documents. A resume, a one-pager. Half of that list is not design work, it is sales and marketing. I am not accusing anyone of anything. These are good products and the feature lists are honest. Notice what I am not saying. The point is about direction, not about blame. The frontier is racing toward long-horizon agents, and it is getting cheaper at a rate that genuinely surprises me. Meanwhile, the commercial surface that expanded fastest that week was an advertising platform, and the most polished vertical product on the market is aimed squarely at the one function that already sits at 52%. The supply side is not fighting the pattern in the census data. It is following it. So has any of this changed the work? Chapter 6, the one number everybody agrees on. 2 surveys disagree about American AI adoption by a factor of 4. Ask them what it has done, and they land almost on top of each other. Start with the census supplement. Among firms using AI, asked whether AI has driven a change in their total employment over the last 6 months. Increased 2.3%. Decreased 2.0%. No change 95.7%. Weighted by employment and the picture barely moves. 93.9% report no change. Now go to the other survey. Different sample, different respondents, 4 countries, a 3-year window instead of 6 months. More than 90% of business managers estimate no impact of AI on their employment over the past 3 years. 89% report no impact on their labor productivity. Think about how unlikely that agreement is. These 2 instruments cannot agree on how many firms use the technology. They cannot agree within a factor of 4. And yet on the question of what it has done to headcount, they produce nearly the same answer. That should update you, it updated me. The mechanism data says why. Firms were asked what AI does to tasks and could pick more than one answer. About 44% use it to supplement or enhance a task an employee performs. About 10% use it to perform a task previously done by an employee. About 11% use it to introduce a new task. And 52% of AI-using firms report none of those 3 effects at all. Among firms that do report a task effect, 66% report augmentation only. Here is the finding I did not expect, and it has stayed with me. 16% of AI-using firms report replacing equipment or software with AI. 16% replacing capital. Around 5% reporting any employment change in either direction. Right now, in the aggregate, AI is substituting for legacy software about 3 times more often than it is substituting for people. The thing it is displacing is your old vendor contract. There is one more result, and this is where I have to be careful with you, because it is a correlation and the authors label it as one. The paper runs regressions of firm outcomes on 3 separate measures of AI use. How many functions, how many worker tasks, and how much operational investment. Functional breadth is associated with a small increase in the likelihood of employment decline, 0.8 to 0.9 of a percentage point against a baseline of 9 to 10%. Operational investment is associated with a larger one, about 2 percentage points. And worker task breadth, employees using generative AI in their day-to-day work, shows no statistically significant association with employment decrease at all. Read that carefully because the popular version of this story has it backwards. It is not the writers using chatbots that shows up next to headcount decline in this data. It is the firms wiring AI into more departments and spending money to operationalize it. Association, not causation. The authors say so explicitly, and I am saying it too. But if you wanted an early warning indicator, it would not be how many of your colleagues have a subscription. It would be whether your employer is rebuilding workflows around one. Chapter 7, not applicable. The supplement asks firms with no near-term plans to use AI why not. They pick from 11 reasons. The runaway winner at 65% is that AI is not applicable to this business. Not too expensive, not too risky, not applicable. What does not applicable actually mean on the ground? For a two-person landscaping company, it means the work is outdoors and physical, and there is no document anywhere in it. For a machine shop, it means the bottleneck is the machine. Neither of those is ignorance. Both of those are accurate statements about the shape of the work. Lack of knowledge about what AI can do comes a distant second at 22%. Privacy and security concerns 20%. And near the bottom of the list, the least common reasons of all are using vendors or consultants to implement it, and laws or regulations that prevent or restrict use. Hold that last one up against the discourse. In the absence of broad federal regulation as of early 2026, the census authors conclude that regulatory friction is a minor factor in aggregate non-adoption. Firms are not being held back by the rules. They looked at the technology and decided it was not for them. Now, is that judgment correct? The census team clearly thinks some of it is a perception lag. The phrase in the paper is a disconnect between latent technological potential and realized managerial awareness. And given that the same survey found people who did not think marketing counted as production, I would not bet against a little of that. But 2/3 is a very large number to explain away as ignorance. Here is what makes me take it seriously: non-adoption is sticky. Of firms not using AI in the reference Fortnight, 71.5% expect to still not be using it in 6 months. Another 19.1% do not know. Only 9.4% plan to switch on. If you run a small business and you have been feeling behind, read that number one more time. 7 in 10 of your peers are not planning to start either. That is not an argument for standing still. It is a correction to the ambient panic. Adoption is sticky in the other direction too, which cuts the same way. 77.4% of current users expect to keep going, and about 10% expect to stop. So this is not a population poised on the edge of a decision. It is a population that has mostly already made one. And what do they expect to happen? Firms expect aggregate adoption to reach about 22% within 6 months, up from 18%. Large firms, 250 employees and up, project 40% against 31% today. That is growth, it is not a phase change. Compare it to the expectations on the executive side. In the Atlanta Fed study, the same managers who say AI has done nothing to their employment over the past 3 years expect it to reduce employment by around 0.7% over the next 3, averaged across the 4 countries. In the United States specifically, 1.2%. In the United Kingdom's 1.4%. 1.2%. From the most bullish sample in the entire literature, the one that told you 78% adoption. Those same firms expect AI to raise their productivity by about 1.4% over the same 3 years. And here is the gap I keep coming back to. The study also asked employees. Employees expect AI to increase employment at their firms by around 0.5% over 3 years. So the executives forecast a small cut, the workers forecast a small boost, and both forecasts are rounding errors. Even the optimists are not describing a rupture. Chapter 8, 3 numbers to watch. So here is where I have landed, and I want to give you the means to prove me wrong. The AI adoption rate is not a quantity. It is a reading, and the instrument changes the reading. 6%, 17, 28, 78, 88. Every one of those was produced honestly, and the spread between them is mostly a question of what you named and how long a window you allowed. What is stable is the shape. AI is deep in the departments that produce documents and shallow in the departments that produce the product. Most adopters use it in two functions. Two-thirds changed nothing about how they work in order to use it. And it has, so far, moved almost nothing you can measure in employment or productivity. A conclusion that survives across surveys that cannot agree on anything else. 3 numbers in the next census supplement would break that. The first is 6%. Production of goods and provision of services taken together. That is the front office claim in one figure. If it clears the low teens while sales and marketing plateaus, I am wrong about where this technology lives. The second is 1.2%. The comprehensive adopters, 12 of 15 functions. If that class reaches something like 5% of all firms, then narrow and off the shelf stops being the story and I should stop telling it. The third is 2%. The share of AI-using firms reporting an employment decrease. If that reaches high single digits while the augmentation share falls, the augmentation era is over and I will say so. Now the caveat that cuts against my own argument, because you should have it. All of this is self-reported, usually by one person per firm, an owner or an executive who cannot see every browser tab in the building. The census team names this directly. They call it the visibility gap, and it is the reason they built the 15-function matrix in the first place. That gap makes the low numbers too low. It probably does not make them 4 times too low. But I would not bet the house on 6% being exactly right, and neither should you. One last thing. The next time somebody puts an AI adoption figure on a slide in front of you, and somebody will this quarter, you now know the only question that matters. Not is it high, not is it rising. What did they ask and who did they ask it of?